Say the truth hurts, the truth hurts, so you about to feel pain. And I gotta do work, God said I gotta do work, cause it's off with the name, Savage Truth. The savage truth, it's the savage truth, the savage truth.
This is the Savage Truth Podcast, and I am Pastor Roy Dockery. Thank you for joining me again for another episode today. And today we're going to do a Savage review. We're going to do a book review. But before we get to that, just real quick, shout out to the YouTube channel. Shout out to the podcast listeners listening on whatever your favorite podcast app is. Also, shout out to the Discord family, the Savage Truth server on Discord. If you're not in it, join it. Click the description or click the link, the invite link in on whatever device you're looking at, whether it's in the YouTube box or in the podcast description. Click the link to join the Discord channel. And yeah, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, stay informed of these Savage Truth Tuesday drops. So if you're on the podcast, you're only going to get this Tuesday drop. There is some other content that dropped this Tuesday on YouTube, but since it's mostly a video review, because I'm talking about sneakers, I'm not putting it on the podcast because you can't really see it, and it's really a visual thing. But with this discussion about the book that I'm going to talk about today, this is such a critical book that it kind of jumped ahead of my list. I literally have dozens of written summaries of books that I've written because I take written notes or I type notes on every book that I read. So I probably have a couple hundred notes, and I've probably only done 5 or 6 videos. So there's a lot in the backlog, but I just had to reread this book again because we're using it from a church leadership perspective. I've read it twice for work. I've facilitated like workshops with my team and assignments for various leaders. So I wanted to jump into this book, and I wanted to talk about crucial conversations. So right here, right? Name of the book, Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. The foreword's by Stephen Covey, and it's written by Patterson, Greene, McMillan, and Switzler. So 4 authors of this book. I had my daughter read this book. She devoured it in like a day. It's not that long. It's 11 chapters, 244 pages. Crucial Conversations is what we're talking about. So the reason I think this book is important, and it comes down to like a kind of fundamental concept that's in like the first chapter, and I'll run through the chapters just to give you guys an idea. I'm gonna try to keep this video less than 20 minutes if I can. So there's something that they kind of identify in the book, and it's called the fool's choice. And essentially the fool's choice is that people feel like they have to choose between being honest and being liked or being like friendly, right? So it's like, I can be honest with you or we can be friends. So there's this thing that like honesty is becoming a poor form of currency in relationships, that you can lose relationships or you can damage relationships by being honest. And so this is the Savage Truth Network. This is the Savage Truth channel. I've kind of had the mentality around Savage Truth since I released the album and started writing the book in 2017. I did not read Crucial Conversations until 2019. So I was happy to find that people had done research on the same thing that I advocate for, which is to be honest. I'm a Christian, so we need to be honest with love. Crucial Conversations is about being honest and being respectful. So a quick rundown through the book. Chapter 1, right, is defining what is a crucial conversation and why should you care. So a definition: crucial conversation is a discussion between 2 or more people when 1, stakes are high, 2, the opinions vary, and 3, emotions run strong. We can listen to them 3 things, and we know that there are situations we face that we're in crucial conversations, right? And then what they go on to say is that emotions don't exactly prepare us to communicate effectively, right? So the way that our genetics work, our fight or flight responses, when we get all emotional, right? Like we either want to fight or we want to run, right? So it puts us in this like violence or silence methodology, and Crucial Conversations talks a lot about the difference in those 2 things. And one thing that I'll quote from the book, it basically says that silence kills and silence fails, right? So when we shut down, when we get quiet, when we withdraw from conversations, that is us failing and having a crucial conversation. So with that said, also, they reference some research, right? Where when couples are in heated discussions, right? This researcher learned that people fall into one of three categories when they get into a heated argument. Let's see if you fall into any of these categories, Savage Truth family. If we're being honest with ourselves, category number one, those who digress into threats and name calling. So you're in an argument, right? You had a point, you had an opinion. Now you're into threats and name calling. Number two, they revert into silent fuming. So you shut down and just start talking. And number three are those who speak openly, honestly, and effectively. So how many of you are in that third category, that when you get into a heated discussion, you communicate openly, honestly, and effectively? The beautiful thing I love about Crucial Conversations is that is what they're trying to teach you how to do, right? Not to back down, not to just cater to everybody and make people feel better, but have an open, honest, and effective conversation. So that is chapter one. Then it goes into chapter two. Title of chapter two is Mastering Crucial Conversations. And they're talking about the power of dialogue. And they have a quote in the book from Martin Luther King. They also quote Proverbs in this book. I believe at least one of the authors is Christian, because they quote a lot of scriptural concepts. But a quote from Martin Luther King here where it says, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." And that's a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, right? Because they're talking about these two options most people contend with, especially when you're talking about communicating with people in different levels of authority, talking at work, right? It's option number one is to speak up and turn the most powerful person in the company into your sworn enemy, right? Or number two, suffer in silence and make a bad decision and allow the company to make a bad decision, or allow a person to make a bad decision that might ruin the company, right? So again, and what I talked about, and this is a quote from the book, the mistake that most of us make in our crucial conversations is we believe that we have to choose between telling the truth and keeping a friend. Between telling the truth and keeping a friend. This is probably why I have a small number of friends, because I tell the truth a lot. Had to sip some water on that one. Yeah, everybody in the Savage Truth community know, right? I don't get many text messages because people don't want to hear a truthful answer often. So again, right, chapter 2 is all about dialogue. So the way that they define dialogue in the book is that dialogue is the free flow of meaning between two or more people. Dialogue, right? Free flow of meaning, not just words, but meaning. And then so the book goes into all of the stuff about creating a shared pool of meaning, where in a conversation and in dialogue, the purpose of that conversation and dialogue is to add things into this shared pool of meaning, right? To add things to the conversation so that I understand your history, I'm understanding your context, I'm understanding your point of view more and more as the conversation progresses. And it stops me from withdrawing, stops you from withdrawing, and it creates synergy in that dialogue. So that's chapter 2. Go on to chapter 3, which I have to teach now on our at our leadership meeting for church. Chapter 3 is Start with the Heart, and it's how to stay focused at what you really want. Right? There's a quote here from Ambrose Bierce that says, "Speak when you are angry, and you will make the best speech you will ever regret." Sure, a lot of us can relate to that. We say dumb things when we're angry. Again, a lot of it is because when we're angry, we're in fight or flight mode, and actually more blood leaves our brain and starts going to our fist and our muscles and our heart. And we're actually just dumber when we're angry. So we have to be more intentional about communication, because what we don't want to do, right, when we don't focus on us, right, we don't focus on our intent and our heart, right? Like if we can't get ourselves right first, then we're going to have a hard time getting the dialogue right, because we go from trying to add into the shared pool of meaning, trying to dialogue with individuals. We go from that, and now we're just about winning. We want to win the argument, or we want to punish the person that we're arguing with, right? So what they said in the book is that eventually, as emotions reach their peak, our goal becomes completely perverted. We move so far away from adding meaning to the pool that now all we want to see is others suffer, right? So the question we got to ask ourselves, right, when we're reflecting on us, and I'm giving you guys a lot from the book, go read it yourself, is number 1, what do I really want for myself? Number 2, what do I really want for others? And 3, what do I really want for this relationship? right? And if we behave and act in the way always, focusing on us first and then other people second, focusing on what we really want, and again, refusing that fool's choice that I can be honest and keep a friend. I can be honest and keep my job. I can be honest and keep my reputation or relationships. So that's chapter 3. On to chapter 4. So chapter 4 is learn to look and how to notice when safety is at risk. So the safety they're talking about is really when people start to withdraw from conversations, or when you start to go blind and don't start to pick up on body language or concern or fear that your communication and your dialogue is creating in the conversation that you're having with somebody, right? So they talk about silence, right? And the most common forms of silence are masking, avoiding, and withdrawing. Masking is kind of what it sounds like, right? It's selectively showing your true opinions, right? It's not keeping it 100. It's sarcasm, sugarcoating, and couching are some of the more popular forms that they're using here. As a direct quote, another direct quote. So for avoiding involves steering completely away from sensitive subjects, as we do in our family. When people don't want to talk about something, we actually sing a song that's like, change the subject, because if it gets awkward, you just want to change the subject. Right. But in this, and they're quoting in the book, is that we talk, but without addressing the real issues. Right. And then withdrawing, and these are the 3 forms of silence. Withdrawing means you pull out of the conversation altogether, right? You exit the room, you stop talking, you hang up the phone. That's withdrawing. And that is a form of silence. Now, on the other side of the coin, and I talked about it earlier, it's silence and violence. So with violence, right? Violence, right, is most commonly shown in the 3 forms of controlling, labeling, and attacking. So controlling is coercing others to think your way. That's manipulating people to do what you want. So that's cutting people off, overstating your facts, speaking in absolutes, changing the subject, and using directive questions to control the conversation. Labeling, right? Another form of violence is putting a label on people or ideas so we can dismiss them under a general stereotype of category. Liberals, snowflakes, conservatives, evangelicals, democrats. Labels, right? It's violence, right? It's a way to dismiss people and put people in a general stereotype or category. Christians, right? We get put in categories often. And then the last form of violence is attacking, right? Which is you basically, and what they're saying here is you've moved from winning the argument to making the person suffer. And that's belittling and threatening people, right? So that's like the lowest base form of violence when we talk about identifying like unsafe conditions. So silence and violence are both unsafe conditions in dialogue. So when we go to chapter 5, right, it's about, well, how do we make it safe? How do you make it safe to talk about almost anything is the title of chapter 5. And I love the fact that they use a scripture. They use Proverbs 25:11 in the heading of that chapter. And it says, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in baskets of silver. Right? So it's about respect. It's about mutual dialogue. They call it looking for mutuality. Right? And so the question is, can you respect people you don't respect? People who you don't put respect on their name. But can you have an effective conversation, and can you be respectful in that conversation with people that you don't even respect? Which, as a Christian, this should be easy, because not only are you called to respect, you're called to love people, right? And you're called to consider people more significant than yourselves. But I'm gonna go back to the book review before I start preaching to y'all on how y'all need to be having crucial conversations in Jesus' name. Amen. We gonna move on. So, right, the 3 skills that you need to keep safe dialogue going, right? So the 3, they talk about apologizing, contrasting, and creating mutual purpose. So apologizing is what it sounds like, right? Offering a sincere apology, right? Not just saving face about being right or trying to win, but like having a sincere apology, also indicating that like your motives have changed, right? You've had a shift in your motives, and now you're apologizing for that as well. So contrasting, on the other hand, is not apologizing. And this is a direct quote from the book. Contrasting is not apologizing. It's important to understand that contrasting is not apologizing. They say it twice, right? It is not a way of taking back something we've said that hurt others' feelings. Rather, it is a way of ensuring that what we said didn't hurt more than it should have. I love that it didn't hurt more than it should have. And again, this is being honest with love. Christians, listen, being honest with love, right? There's no need for me to hurt you more than necessary. But if I tell the truth and it hurts you, then, there's ways that you can use contrasting for prevention, or they call it first aid, right? And then that last point is mutual purpose, right? You have a heartfelt commitment to stay in the conversation until you come to a solution and a purpose that both people can share, right? So you got to recognize the purpose behind the strategy. And when you're talking about mutual purpose, they use an acronym and, acrostic of CRIB, right? So create a mutual purpose, or no, commit to seek mutual purpose, recognize the purpose behind the strategy, invent a mutual purpose, and then brainstorm on new strategies. CRIB, CRIB. And that's it. So, right, the summary about making it safe, right? Establishing mutual purpose and mutual respect, apologize when it's appropriate, contrast so you're not doing undue harm, and then work on creating a mutual purpose. I love chapter 6, which is entitled Master My Stories, How to Stay in Dialogue When You're Angry, Scared, or Hurt. So what's interesting is what they're basically saying in this chapter is that we all tell ourselves stories, right? We observe information, there's stimulus that we encounter, and then we're telling ourselves a story. So we tell ourselves a story that basically makes someone else the villain, makes someone else the victim. But it's going to the thing that, like, other people can't control your emotions. Our emotions, our mind state is based on the story that we're telling ourselves, right? So and the thing here is claim one is no matter how comfortable it might make you feel saying it's others saying it, no matter how comfortable it might make you feel saying it, others don't make you mad. You make you mad. You make you scared, annoyed, or insulted. You and only you create your emotions, right? Claim two is you can act on them, talking about your emotions. You can act on them, or you can be acted on by them, right? So the people who are the best at dialogue do something different because they aren't held hostage by their emotions, nor do they try to hide or suppress them. Instead, they act on their emotions. So when this whole story is just talking about this whole chapter of talking about stories is amazing because they're like, we tell villain stories where it's all somebody else's fault. We tell helpless stories where there's nothing else I can do. We tell clever stories that match reality but remove our responsibility and keep us from acknowledging what they call our own sellouts, right? And sellouts aren't like these huge, big events like, you talk about selling out from a civil rights perspective or representation of a group or community, but they were like sellouts are things like you believe you should help someone, but you don't, right? You think you should apologize, but you don't. You say yes when you should say no. You see problems with the plan somebody presents and you don't speak up, or you have information somebody could use, but you keep it to yourself. Right? Like in these stories, we turn victims into actors. We turn, right? There's things that we can do to help like create these stories. And I love the fact that they were like, when anything that you're evaluating, you ask yourself the question, right? Why any reasonable, rational, or decent person might be acting a certain way. So if someone's angry at you or short or disrespectful, like, is there any reasonable, rational, or, any reasonable, rational reason why the person might be acting like this, right? Not to make an excuse, but to understand the humanity of other people, right? So that's chapter 6. I love the chapter on stories. And then it goes to chapter 7. So chapter 7 is, state your path, state my path, how to speak persuasively, and not abrasively. Right? It says the best at dialogue speak their minds completely and do it in a way that makes it safe for others to hear what they have to say and respond to it as well. They are both totally frank and completely respectful. Savage truth. Totally frank, completely respectful, right? That means they're willing to both express their opinions and encourage others to do the same. They're right. They speak the unspeakable, and people are grateful for their honesty. That is the savage truth wrapped up in a bow. If I've ever heard it, y'all should read chapter 7. If y'all in the Patreon or Discord community, y'all understand where I'm coming from. So then chapter 8 moves on to what they call explore others' paths. This is on how to listen when others blow up or clam up, right? So if people explode on you or if they go quiet, there's 4 things that they say. Be sincere, be curious, stay curious, and be patient, right? Because what they found is that most of the time we're in violent agreement. And what it means by violent agreement is that most, and this is a quote, most arguments consist of battles over 5 to 10% of the facts and stories that people disagree over. So we agree on 90 to 95%, but we're arguing violently over the 5 or 10% we don't agree with. Anybody think that applies to our politics, to our concepts on social justice, our pro or against libertarian constitutionalists, like all of these things, right? Like we're normally like 80% together, but then we choose to try to kill each other over the 5 or 10% that we disagree on. So that is what it is. So then chapter 9 talks about moving into action, right? How to turn crucial conversations into action and results. And they talk about decision making and planning. I love the fact that they talk about 4 ways of making a decision: a command decision, right? Like consulting for decisions, voting on a decision, and having consensus. And they walk through a lot of these churches. Y'all need to understand everything doesn't need to be done by consensus and everything can't be done by command, right? There's some other options in there: voting, consulting, right? Bring people in your organization in depending on what method makes sense, right? Who cares? Who knows? Who needs to agree? How many people is it valuable to involve, right? These are all questions that should be asked in any organization when you're having dialogue around decisions. But every decision, right? You can't have the constipation of consensus and do nothing in your organization because 100% of people don't agree, right? So whole chapter on that in chapter 9, great to know. Chapter 10 is it's called Yeah, But Advice for Tough Cases. It just walks you through some situations and ways that you can manage it for people who think, oh, well, my situation is too complex. I can't apply these simple principles for crucial conversations. And then in chapter 11, it transitions to, right, how to win an argument on any topic. They use a quote from this guy that said, I can win an argument on any topic against any opponent. People know this and stare clear of me at parties. Often as a sign of their great respect, they don't even invite me. And that was a quote from Dave Barry. So you put it all together, right? You have to learn to look. And the fact is, people who improve their dialogue skills continually ask themselves whether they're in or out of dialogue. So one of the things that I've noticed is that after reading this book, after my team reading this book, the way that we reflect on conversations, even if we're not as crucial in them, right? If we get angry, if we withdraw, if we act with silence or violence, if we're masking or controlling or contrasting, like we may do all of these different things within a conversation, but being aware of the concept of crucial conversations makes us step back and then evaluate like, okay, what could I have done different? So sometimes my employees will just reach out to me. They'll be like, yeah, I failed at a crucial conversation today. I know I should have taken this approach, but I went in this direction. So let me go back and correct. So it establishes a framework, not only for the way that you engage in conversations, but the way you reflect on a conversation that you already had, the way that you reflect on the way that you talk to people, the way that you try to engage in dialogue to add more shared meaning to the pool. And at the bottom of it is that you always start with the heart. Start with you. Almost sounds Christian, doesn't it, right? Look at the plank in your eye before you try to pull the speck out of someone else's, right? What are you bringing to this conversation? What are you really trying to accomplish? Like, are you really here to learn and to listen and to collaborate? Or are you here to manipulate and to control and to force people ultimately into your direction and into your opinion? Because that's not a conversation. That is not dialogue, right? That is direction. That is commanding. And that's the case. But So I want to recommend that everyone reads this book. Single, married, children, adults. If you have a kid that's at 13 or older, let them read this book. I recommend this to everyone we do marriage counseling for. I recommend that this book gets read for every single one of my mentees, anyone that I'm doing life coaching for, anyone who works for me, anyone who works with me, because it is extremely important for us to know how to communicate and how to keep people engaged in dialogue. And more than anything, it's important for us to understand that we can be honest and still be respectful, that we can be honest and we can keep friends, that we can be honest and keep our jobs. Because the savage truth is, too many of us fail at crucial conversations. Too many of us fail at being honest and speaking the truth because we're afraid of what it might do to a friendship. So if people can't love you when you're honest, then you might need to find some new people to be around. But that's just me. So, very popular book. As you can see at the top, at the time this was ordered, over 4 million copies sold. So very, very highly esteemed book. They also write a book called Crucial Accountability. They got a book called Influencer as well. So great book. This is like the top of my read list. If you got one book to buy to read, I'm going to tell you to read this one. Audible it. You know what I mean? Get a CD. They got CDs too. One of my employees got a CD. So they got CDs too. If you need an audiobook, get an audiobook, but absolutely read this book. Take notes, do the worksheets, apply it to your marriage, apply it to your parenting, apply it to your job, apply it to your ministry, apply it to your conversation at the grocery store, and become a more effective communicator who doesn't have to avoid honesty to remain engaged in the conversation. So thank you for joining me for this Savage Truth podcast episode review of Crucial Conversations. Hope that you stay around. I hope you join us. I hope you stay connected to the community. Join the Discord, subscribe to the YouTube, subscribe to the podcast. Get those automatic downloads, hit your notification button, all of that good stuff that you can do on YouTube. And we appreciate you being with us here on this evening. So that's all that I have, and that's all that I'll share with you on today. We will catch you on next week's Savage Truth Tuesday drop. For those that are gonna go check out the videos on YouTube, enjoy those. I'm gonna be talking about some sneakers today, cause I love sneakers. So hope y'all have a blessed day. This is Pastor Roy signing out for the Savage Truth Podcast. Love you. Peace out.
They keep asking who I am, I just tell them I'm a Christian. Occupation, a description, I just tell them I'm a Christian. Nationality, ethnicity, I tell them I'm a Christian. Keep the hyphens in division.